These things are really ugly, but that's part of the attraction for me. They're powerful and they're brutal and they're vulnerable at the same time. I can think of no other machine that provokes such a wide range of human emotions than the submarine.
The submarine to me is the symbol of destruction. It is a complete opposite spectrum of the things I'm engaged in. Being closely involved with creation, I must try in many ways to approach and have a look at destruction. About 2 years ago, I had a basic idea that there was something here that I wanted to delve into. I mean, the ships on Clydeside have died. The submarine on Clydeside has grown and continues to grow. And there was something that had to be said about the relationship I felt between the ship and the submarine. I try and make my exhibitions as broad-based as possible because I feel that art in many ways has become a kind of exclusive club. It always intrigues me that when you start to talk to people or you show them something, how quickly they become involved in it. And they don't need a lot. They need a sound, they need an insight, perhaps they need a title. Perhaps they recognise something that is meaningful to them. In the context of the exhibition, the paintings are supposed to be there as the ghosts of dead ships. They're supposed to be the remnants of past happenings. They are wounded, or they are dead, or some act has happened to them. The submarines have died, killing the ships. The ships are dead. They are, in a sense, they are all victims. Living in a place like Clydebank, you must be aware of death. The fact that a blitz had taken place here and so many people had died, you could not be aware of anything other than death. But it's not an obsession with death. It's in the realisation that this span is finite. 7 years before I was born, my hometown of Clydebank was almost completely destroyed. You know, there was places where we played as children where it was sensed that some dreadful things had happened there, and the kids never actually played in these places. They kept away from them. It was strange. So I grew up with the sort of strange impression that the whole world had been literally destroyed in the Blitz, and that this was normal, so that type of destruction was just my normal environment. I think I was a very kind of, not so much a loner, but a very singular sort of person, in that I was never really interested to any great degree in being involved in mass games, you know. I was never a football fanatic or anything like that. I mean, I always had this urge to just be quiet and go away and look at things and draw things.
For she's your feathers, Mammy, you can shove your other granny off a bus.
The first time I came across a submarine was in childhood. It was a pleasure shared by a generation. The Kellogg's freebie, the bacon soda submarine.
Submarine dead ahead. Stand by. And no ordinary sub either. It's a real working model of the world's first atomic power sub, which dives and surfaces in water all by itself with baking powder for fuel. This wonderful toy is absolutely free in packets of Kellogg's cornflakes. If you want to own an atomic sub, get the packet marked like this quickly, or they'll all be gone.
See, the thing was, if you wanted a good collection, then you'd eat cornflakes. So you almost put yourself into this bizarre circumstance where, you know, what would you like for your dinner? Cornflakes, Mammy. What would you like for your breakfast? Cornflakes, Mammy. What would you like for your tea? Cornflakes. I mean, I had vast collections of these things. Count them every day, you know, 50, 60. And I'll never really forget that day, that chilly Friday in December in 1963. I was ejected from school, and on the following Monday, laden with my wee tea can and my piece, I sort of shuffled my wimpish frame through the gatehouse of the mighty John Brown's shipyard to be apprenticed. An apprenticeship is a strange sort of thing. It's sort of taking into care and taking the mickey out of simultaneously. Here was this ribbon of land, 1 mile long by about a quarter of a mile wide, and there were 10,000 men packed into that. And it was really quite a unique experience for a young innocent guy like me walking into a place like this. These men had been in a war, and they'd fought all over this planet, and they had an incredible wealth of experience.
I think this shows, especially if you go abroad, and they ask you where you come from, and you say, Glasgow. Where's Glasgow? Claybank. Where's Claybank? Where the big ships were built. Queen. Oh, that place. Oh, we're not fine.
And they all had a great pride in their work. And I think it was a good thing for the firm that they were all proud of the parts they were doing building a ship. from the draftsman down to the labourers. We're all doing a wee bit.
The thing that intrigued me in the shipyards was this incredible accuracy. I mean, here you're dealing with, 16, 70 ton chunks of steel, and they've been heated red hot, and they've been moulded, and they're bent, but the powers are enormous, but it's such a delicate operation in that these units have got to fit together to an eighth of an inch. I think when you work in a shipyard, you become attuned to shapes. You become attuned to the shapes that are the jigsaw pieces that construct a ship. Look at this. This is what remains of the shipyard that I worked in 22 years ago. It's decayed, it's broken, it's smashed, but to me, it still has an interest, an alive interest. Look at these things across here. These things are called rams. It was things like this that first gave a boat its first push during the launch. Some of these would have been responsible for pushing the Great Cunarders, the Queens, maybe even ships like the Hood. They're massive things. They've got lovely colour, lovely surfaces. And all these wee coats and all these wee lovely textures are really, really important as far as I'm concerned when I think about painting anything or creating anything that's really got to do with shipyards. This gate's probably been painted about 20 or 30 times. There's a nice wee bit here where somebody's probably in a bad temper or something like that and has actually burnt and scarred the hole in the gate, and it's melted the tar coating, and it's all started to run into the rust and peel off the paint. And it really has its own sort of fascinating beauty. I like that. That's interesting. There's other bits in this door that are equally fascinating. I mean, there's a lot of human endeavour in this. There's hours and hours of people painting. Men would have swung open this door, shut it, battered things into it, messed about with it, painted it, scrawled graffiti on it. These sort of things have a history all on their own. And to me, have a certain special kind of life that you just wouldn't find in any other industry. In a shipyard, you paint walls with any convenient colour of paint you've got. You can see under here there's a sort of reddy pink that really is quite nice. And then there's battleship grey. And obviously during the war years, that would have been a predominant colour in shipyards. Again, it's rusted. We've got some of the yellow paint running through here. And obviously the roof's leaking and there's a lot of water about and it's running and it's streaking. And all these little multicoloured streaks of paint have got their own sort of small kind of intimate beauty.
To me, that I find quite intriguing. Look at the plum red of these colours in here. Obviously the rust washing off the pipe and going onto the yellow paint. The water in the surface corroding it and eroding it. I find that fascinating. The forces used to mould ships are really, at times, quite violent and quite dangerous. I mean, something in its life has smashed into the side of this, and it's literally just sliced into it like a bit of paper. That's about 1/4 inch thick steel, and it's just straight through. But it's nice, it's got a beauty all of its own. It's almost a kind of sculpted cut. If you look at this great boiler shape here, and the surface of this, again, it's got all sorts of coats of paint in it, and it's been scraped and bashed against. And it's got a kind of black, oily surface. But you've got this warmth, or this rich rust colour beginning to break through this. Lovely mark made by a weld here. Across here, there's another lovely surface. This pitted orange surface of this huge boiler. And it really is, it's an extraordinary colour. You'll never really see a colour like that any place else other than a place like a shipyard. There's another example of the same thing across here, except some of the paint remains on it. And some of these wee areas, I mean, they're almost like abstract paintings in their own right. There's a huge battleship grey boiler, but the weather has got to it. It started to erode, it started to corrode, the rust started to come through, it started to run over the grey paint. And you've got all these beautiful mixtures of colour, of oranges and greys as they run together. Across here, there's a nice band of rivets. Lovely, lovely looking thing. Into this piece of water behind me, the Pride of Clyde was launched. Mighty Cunarders, huge battleships, thousands and thousands of tons of steel were launched down this slipway. And in these very stocks, the Lusitania was built. The first and most shocking submarine atrocity was the torpedoing of the Lusitania with the loss of over 1,000 civilian lives. The Lusitania is really part of Clydebank folklore. The two things that probably are remembered the most was the fact that it was such an incredible atrocity, being the first civilian ship that was torpedoed, and also the fact that it was a particularly beautiful ship.
Um 2:25 beschloss
At 2:25, Captain Schwager, commander of U-20, noted in his logbook. It seemed as if the vessel would only be afloat for a short time. We submerged to 24 metres and out to sea. I could not have fired another torpedo into this throng of humanity attempting to save themselves. In these moments of shocked realisation, this once comical tin can had come of age. An awesome new weapon was born. The ancient dream of warring men to strike a death blow unseen had become a reality.
Aesthetics has always been a part of weapon making, right from the very beginning, when man became a tool maker. He took his axes and he smoothed and honed them beyond functional need. And it's always been like that through history. The sword, beautifully ornate, decorative, even all the way up to modern times, the Spitfire with its graceful lines. But when you come to the submarine, there's a different sort of aesthetic consideration. Aesthetics are cast out the window, because what you see behind me is man's attempt at the pursuit of invisibility. Invisibility does not need aesthetics.
As man became the conqueror of the seas, it was inevitable that his attentions would return to explore the mysteries of its depths, and it was this tantalising desire that gave birth to the submarine. The Bone submarine was basically a rowing boat, and it was covered in sort of greased skins, and it had side tanks in it that were made of leather, and these would fill with water, and the wee ship would actually sink, and inside it would be the oarsmen, and they would row the ship underwater. And I love the kind of quaint phrase of the time that actually describes the submarine, that it may go under the water into the bottom, and so to come up again at your pleasure. The Dassault submarine is where the idea of the submarine turns to a weapon of war. This was this great, huge, 72-foot long submarine that was worked with a clockwork engine, and it was supposed to be a formidable weapon that Dassault claimed doth undertake in one day to destroy 100 ships, would have the speed of a bird, be immune to fire, storm and bullet unless it pleased God. But unfortunately the clockwork engine wasn't strong enough, and the actual thing never moved. The David submarine was so called because it was thought to be a giant killer. And these small submarines were known as the Confederate Infernal Machines. Basically, it was a small boat, a steam engine inside it, and on the front of this it had a huge pole called a spar torpedo. Now this was a real kamikaze weapon, because the people who operated the submarine were never any further than 20 feet away from the explosion, and the loss of life in operating these things was really quite dramatic. The interesting thing about the British Resurgam was that it was built by a man of the cloth, the Reverend George Garrett, and he was challenged about building a destructive weapon. But he claimed that every contribution made by science to improve instruments of war makes war shorter, and in the end less terrible to human life and human progress. Unfortunately, the Resurgam sank in its maiden voyage, killing everybody in it. The most significant thing about the First World War U-boat was that this was when the weapon came of age. This was really when the submarine turned from an idea into an awesome new weapon with the most amazing killing potential. It was submarines like this that sent 6,000 merchantmen to a watery grave and also sank the Lusitania. If there was such a thing as a beautiful submarine, then for me it would be the British U-class. There is just something about the lines and the shape of this submarine that I really find quite intriguing, even although it's a killing machine. Unfortunately, 14 of these wee ships were lost in the Mediterranean.
Everything that's ever been designed by men has been designed for the needs of men, except the submarine. If you think of the motor car, for instance, it is designed round legs, arms, feet, how it works and how it functions. The submarine completely disobeys these rules and regulations. This was designed primarily as a weapon. Men were injected into the submarine as an afterthought.
First thing you do to build a sub is you take a block of clay. And the thing that intrigues me about the block of clay is totally formless. Here you've got this soft, malleable material, and you really have got to make it think your way, that it's dead, that it's inanimate, that it's just a piece of matter. And I love the idea of just taking something like that and moulding it and controlling it. I find it really intriguing to actually lift this out of the water and say, look at this, you know, because that's part and parcel of my job, just really bringing people's attention to these things. And in many ways, they are quite beautiful. You build the shell. After you've built the shell, you put bulkheads on the inside of it, and then you join the two halves together. And it's very, very similar to the shipbuilding process. The shell, structured and supported in the inside by bulkheads. The shape that you see externally is not the real shape of the submarine. The shape of the submarine is a torpedo shape. Everything else, the decking, the conning tower and everything that's built on it is really superfluous.
This is the best example of the idea of a submarine being a machine and men being sort of put into it as an afterthought. There's nothing to do with anything like human consideration in here. This is literally a machine. And walking through this is literally like walking through the guts of some great, huge mechanical beast. It really is quite frightening to actually be in this kind of claustrophobic atmosphere.
When you turn them upside down and you're working on them, you become aware of the fact that this is designed to cut through water. It has this ship shape. It has this sort of nice, round, long, slim, practical shape for the job that it does. When I sculpt a submarine, I exaggerate the features that are submarine features. It's like making a portrait or almost a cartoon of something. There's things that you see on these submarines you would not normally see in life. You wouldn't see the seams, you wouldn't see this particular bit of the conning tower, you wouldn't see the cable cutters. So I take these things and I make them a little larger in life.
The oceans that surround us are literally thousands and thousands of carcasses of dead submarines. filled with crews. British, German, Dutch, they're all there. Behind me you can clearly see the killing end of the submarine, and it bears a remarkable resemblance to a shark. The torpedo tubes, they've got hatches on them just now, but when these are opened you can see the two gaping holes from which the torpedoes would have been fired. And it was boats very similar to this that sank 25.5 million tonnes of shipping in the Second World War. And it's this method of sinking, this creeping, stalking and killing, that frightens a lot of people about the submarine, because it's really an assassin's form of attack. Imagine being encased in a space like this in the middle of a depth charge attack. It must have been absolutely terrifying. The claustrophobia, the cramped conditions, the heat, the sweat. And this is one of the great ironies of submarine warfare. You know, it's a form of attack that has all the hallmarks of cowardice, but you've really got to be very brave to take part in it.
I love the idea of actually taking a piece of clay and then moulding it into something and, you know, heating it to thousands of degrees, and the thing actually vitrifies and turns to stone. It's almost like a fossil. And, you know, there's all that kind of play in there about fossils, tell time, you know, have their own place in time, in space. And the idea that they're sitting in there and they're almost red hot really was one of the fundamental ideas that brought about the exhibition and the way that it evolved.
When I worked in the shipyards, I worked with lots of men who'd been in convoys in the Atlantic and had been torpedoed. And they said that the two things that you feared most was, one, that when you hit the water it was sometimes so cold that you could literally feel your skeleton in seconds. And the other was black diesel oil, which to them was known as the blood of dead ships. It would go into your nose, into your eyes and into your lungs and cause you the most incredible pain.
I was walking along a shore and I found a letter being washed up. And I picked it up and I looked at it just out of idle curiosity. And it was a love letter from a sailor to his girlfriend. And I just happened to be talking to somebody about this, and they said that was a common occurrence during the war years, all around the British Isles, because there had been so many ships sunk, that artefacts and personal possessions and mementos were constantly washed up on the shores that surrounded this island.
I'll be seeing you in every lovely summer's day, in everything that's light and
I tend to surround myself with all the sources that I will use in a painting. Sometimes these are perhaps sounds, sometimes they're shapes, sometimes they're pieces of texture. So when I'm thinking in terms of painting a painting, I don't necessarily think of an image. I try and perceive what I think the feel or the mood of the painting has got to be. The fragments might be a noise, it may be a small piece of metal, it may be a flake of coloured paint, and it's a mixture of all these ingredients that create the image. Painting to me is a working process, and anything that I can use to make a creative mark, I'll use. Most people tend to think that my paintings are abstract paintings, but they are only abstract because people are unaware of the sources that I use to paint them. To me, my paintings are real. That is the way I see things. I don't know how to see any other way. But by looking at these very kind of intimate surfaces and very sort of intimate textures and intimate colours, I feel that the painting itself becomes an object. It's not representational of something like this is a bit of a boat or this is a human being's hand. The painting itself actually becomes the object. It is the art. It reproduces nothing. It is an entity in its own right. They are almost religious paintings in the sense that they are icons. The way I like to think of them is like the sea erodes and dissolves and breaks down and takes things back to its basic elements. And I like to think of the idea of these great huge ships becoming weak, becoming eroded, you know, turning to dust, collapsing, being eaten by bacteria, being used and dissolving almost. The paintings are really the building up all these basic elements. There's pieces of rust on them, there's pieces of painted metal, there's all kind of encrusted crustaceans and growths, and there's sand embossed and all sorts of textural things that you would expect to find in a painting of that nature. It's very much a kind of developmental thing. I tend to be a watercolour painter. The reason I like painting in watercolours is because they have this degree of transparency in them. So by painting in maybe 10, 20 or 30 layers of paint, I can create a greater feeling of depth I suppose my style has evolved. There are certain distinguishing marks, like the use of heavy paint, the heavy use of texture. But for each individual to the work, I've got to develop a new way of saying things. I just look at things. And when I mean look at things, I mean it's not only physical things, it's emotional things, it's perceptive things. And I tend to try and take these things and turn them into a solid visual form. And it took me a long time to evolve a painterly language, like the techniques that I use in The Grave of the Undersea Boats. Oceans reveal nothing of the fates of men and ships. No crosses or flowers mark the last resting places of many heroes who lie in their riddled and shattered steel coffins. The grave of the undersea boats is where the submarines go when they die. I invented this object, which I called the Armageddon clock. It plays the part of God, the great all-seeing eye that looks out into the purgatory of the submarine's hell. And it also ticks away time, because the submarines are blind, but the gentle swinging of the pendulum and the ticking of the clock allow them to know that time is passing in this undersea world. My job as an artist is not to draw conclusions for other people. Obviously, in an exhibition like this, what it does is illustrates the questions. It's up to other people to find their own answers. The sea gave up the dead which were in it, and death and hell delivered up the dead which were in them, and they were judged every man according to their works.